Okay. Okay. So we're in a new sugya. Now I decided to do the next sugya just because I couldn't. You couldn't have the gesture of bonus. You couldn't have the shloshim yom kodem achag, shloshim kodem achag come on our page and not do it like that. So we're not going to do that exactly. We'll just talk about the Ran that's here, but we'll talk about the sugya anyway. So I'm a Rav Yehuda, I'm a Rav. This is the string of Rav Yehuda Marav, which is really testing the experience. And Dav Vavam and Aleph. So the last one we had was Motzei Chametz Pesach. That's with your own chametz. Now we're back to the b'dikat chametz issues, and we have a mefarish yוצא בשיירה. If you're going out on a trip, kodem 30 yom ein zakuk levaer. So you don't have to do biur. And the question is, what does he mean biur chametz here? I mean, obviously he means b'dikat chametz, but the question is this. We'll see in a moment the machloket rishonim whether you did bitul or you didn't do bitul. In other words, if you didn't do bitul, it would be somewhat strange. We'll see. That's Rashi's position. Right? You don't have to do biur chametz, or you don't have to get rid of your chametz because you're not going to have access to it. But we'll see. Is there a bayu matzeh problem? So the question is, where does the shloshim yom come from? Why is shloshim yom all of a sudden? Why is that everybody knows this? Like we grew up on this. 30 days before. Do you do b'dika? Well, that's the Gemara is going to connect it to that, right? So that's Rav Yehuda Marav. Okay, so let's just assume for argument's sake that's in the 260s or 270s. Why that's important is because just one generation later, it's obvious that Abai and Rava were aware there was something else going on here, even though Rav Yehuda Marav doesn't say it. And Abai, so they were aware of a Masorah, but they had a debate about what that Masorah was about the following factor, about the following permutation. Amar Abai, within 30 days you have to do it. Lo Amran, so he qualifies again. The second phrase, Tosh Shloshim Yom Shloshim. Lo Amran Ela Shedato Lachzor. Aval Ein Dato Lachzor. If you're not planning to come back. That's not what we do, right? In other words, if you're not planning to come back, then if you're not planning to come back for Pesach, ostensibly not planning to come back ever, not planning to come back for Pesach, then no, he says you don't have to. He says even within 30 days, right? Even within 30 days, so in other words, he knew that there was a factor of planning to come back, not planning to come back. He applied it to the second statement, the second clause of Rav Yehuda Marav. Let me just make that clear. Rav Yehuda Marav says two things. He says if you're going on a trip, you don't have to do it. Within 30 days, you have to do biur. Okay? Abaye says, I have this factor called planning to come back, not planning to come back, and I apply that to the second thing, to the second clause. If within 30 days, zakuk levar, that's only if you're planning to come back. If you're not planning to come back, even within 30 days, there's nothing to talk about. Okay, so that requires an explanation. Right? We'll talk about that in a minute. Amarle Rava, so Rava says, V'ida tolach. So if you're planning to come back, we don't know when you're planning to come back, but let's assume you're planning to come back on Pesach or just before Pesach. I feel in Rosh Hashanah not me. If you're planning to come back on Pesach, then of course you should have to do it. Right, it shouldn't make a difference whether it's 30 days or not. So Amarava, we're gonna apply that Dato Lachzor, which they again, like him and Abai both knew. In other words, a generation they knew Dato Lachzor is a factor, but they applied it to different clauses of Rav Yehuda Marav. Right? You see what I'm saying? Abai applied it to the second clause. Rav is going to apply it to the first clause. He says, right? Before, when you go back 6 months before, when you leave a month and a half before, lo amran she'en dato lachzor. Val dato lachzor, afilu mirosh hashanah zakuk levar. I think that's just the guzma. It means whenever you leave, you have to do it because you're planning to come back before Rosh Hashanah. So as the Rava Latame, Rava, who applies it to the first clause, based on another theory of Rava Dama Rava, who said beito otzar. That is to say, you have chametz in your house, but you're moving. You decided to do shiputzim, so you decided to take all your tables and your couches and whatever, and dump it on top of the chametz. In other words, you've blocked in your chametz, so to speak, so it's not accessible. Kodem 30 yom, ein tzarich levayer. Toch 30 yom zakuk levayer. Kodem 30 yom nami lo amran. 30 days before, if you put your couches on top of your chametz, you don't have to do it. If you're not planning to move your couches before Pesach, but if you're finishing the shiputz before Pesach and you're planning to do it, then if you're planning to move your couches back to the way the original space, so that's the same thing, right? You understand? Or it's inaccessibility versus accessibility. Okay. So then the Gemara says, Hani shloshim yom ma'abilitayu. Where did the shloshim yom come from? Kidetanya. Oh, perfect, right? I don't know what that question mark is doing there, but okay, that's me. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Shtei Shabbaton. My time at the Tanakama. Now I'm in the second Amud Bet. Shari Moshe. Right? Why did Tanakama say Sholim Vidorshin 30 days and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says only 2 weeks? So here I just brought the first part of the Machlokes. We could do more if you want. Shari Moshe omed bePesach Rishon u'matzir al Pesach Sheni. Shneimar v'yasu b'nei Yisrael haPesach b'moado. Uktiv hayu anushim asher hayu tmelim lenefesh adam. That's the beginning of chapter 9 of Bamidbar. Chapter 9 of Bamidbar, you might remember, is a little out of order because it starts in the second year, right? Right, it actually says it started in the second year of the first month, but Moshe is standing on Pesach Rishon. Right, no, he's about he tells them the day should do the Pesach, and then the Tmeim Nefesh come along, and then they get instructed in Pesach Sheni. So what's the difference? What's the time differential between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? So obviously, exactly the Tmeim Nefesh Adam. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, where does he learn Amar Lacha? How does he address that question? Amar Lacha, I did the Iri b'milah de Pischa, masik lu lekol milah de Pischa. This isn't obligate anybody. Just because Moshe was talking about Pesach, so they kept on talking about Pesach. But it's not because there's any halacha of a month before that you have to do something. Then the Gemara asks, my time with the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Sharei Moshe Omed b'Rosh HaChodesh u'Mazir ala Pesach. Now most of the Rishonim take, right? Based on this, they say Shneimar Chodesh Zelachem Rosh Chodeshim. We're not talking about chapter 9 of Bimidbar. We're talking about chapter 12 of Shemot. But it was the original statement of Pesach. Are you with me? So, Uktiv the Ruach Hadat Yisrael more be'Esror LaChodesh Hazev Yichu Ish LaSel Bet Avot Salabay. In other words, it continues saying, right on the 10th you have to take the thing, and then the 14th you offer the Korban Pesach. The Gemara continues. I guess we could just do it quickly. The Gemara continues and says this isn't a good proof, and the Gemara ends up going. The continuation is not so important to me for right now. The Gemara ends up learning also from the Pesach from chapter 9 of Bimidbar. For now, this is good enough for our purposes. Okay, just in terms, I'll start at the end. This Shloshim Yom Kodem Achag Sholim Medoshim Nechag. So there's Machlokes in the Gemara. This maybe we've talked about here for sure, but whether this relates to Pesach and Sukkot. Right? There's a position that relates to all the regalim, relates to just Pesach and Sukkot. That's the Gemara. And then some people say it's only Pesach. Right? So it's only Pesach. You have to do 30 days before. You should be aware that such a thing exists. But what does it mean? Sholin v'dorshin kodim sholin v'dorshin b'chol Pesach kodim Pesach shloshim yom. What does that mean? So usually what that means is the rabbi starts giving drushes and stuff like that. But the Ran on the Rif here has a very, very famous shita, one of the most famous shitas in this whole sugya. People love to quote it. So that's the last source on the 2 pages that I gave you. The Ran says something very interesting. Right? Did I give you the pages or I didn't give you the pages? No. Where are the pages? Sorry. This is the far side of the page. The Ran says, Sholim v'dorshin b'chol Pesach kodim Pesach shloshim yom klomar dechashvinan leishoel ki'inyan. What does that mean? Those are 4 important words. Chashvinan leishoel ki'inyan. V'kaim alan ba'al mashnei avitim shesholin echad shoel ki'inyan echad shoel shelo ki'inyan shenizkakin leishoel ki'inyan. What are we talking about here? Right, this is a very, very thin reading of Sholin v'dorshin shloshim yom kodem achad. It doesn't mean you have to start preparing. The Ran, right, which is the way the Shulchan Aruch takes it and whatever, and that's the way the Mishnah Berurah takes it, and that's why the rabbis started giving drashos and they start whatever. This means that if someone comes and asks you a question, if 2 people come and ask you a question, so how do you decide, a rabbi? How does the rabbi decide who has the priority? They say one has to be shoel ki'inyan, one has to be more relevant. So the Shloshim Yom defines relevance. It's a very, very thin reading. It's a halacha dedicated to rabbis, so the rabbis can know who to prioritize in terms of questions. Someone who has a Pesach Shal, they get priority now over someone who's, I don't know what. Right.
Well, wouldn't it be something that's immediate?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I also thought about that. Like maybe immediate is not the best way to say. He says, right, so he says this is Shol Kinyan. So the Ran has a very, very thin reading. Most Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch, etc., say no, Sholim v'dorshin. This could be dependent. I thought about this maybe on the first 2 lashonim of the Gemara. What does the Gemara say? We learn it from, again, one guy says we learn it. Whatever it's, we have. We have learn it from Pesach Sheni, right? So in Pesach Sheni, what happened? Right? They ask him a question like, "What are we supposed to do?" So it's like it's not an issue of priority, but in other words, the initiation is from the people, as opposed to Moshe saying, Oh, Chodesh Lachem, Chodesh Chodeshim. No, so it could be like that. There's something built into the if you're going to learn it from Pesach Sheni, that it actually is related to a question.
It's true. That's when the Israel starts asking questions about
Pesach Sheni, right?
Not when the rabbis start educating about.
No, correct. That's what the Ran said. But the Ran says it has nothing to do with the rabbis. The rabbis don't have to initiate anything. They just have to sit there. They have to be prepared to answer, to prioritize questions, right?
Well, it actually fits better with Rabbi Shlomo Gamliel's sheet on why that's not a proof, right? Because he says, no, the reason Moshe talked to them about that then was because they were showing Kinyan, because they were Tmeim, right?
Could be right. No, it's right. Exactly. It could be that's what Rabbi Shlomo Gamliel. So that might be latent in the discussion itself. It could be. Okay. Either way, the big discussion here actually divides into two. So those are the two discussions about Shalom and Dorshin. Okay, check. You have to mention the Gra and you have to mention the Ran. Okay, good. We have to say. Anyways, we can talk about more in a minute, but I think people give a lot of shir about this because it's like easy to understand, which is fine. I don't know how much svara there is to it. Okay. The bigger discussion is within Rashi. Rashi says, and here the Rav has a very interesting thing. So first we're going to contrast. There's three pieces in Rashi that are important. One will contrast to the Ran. We'll talk about the Rav's position, and then we'll see some of the other issues in the Rishon. So Rashi says, Kodem Shloshim Yom. Right. So now we're back to not Sholem Medorshin. We're back to if you're on a Shayara. Okay. So first the Rav Yehuda Marav. Right. Remember, so we have three pieces. We have Rav Yehuda Marav's statement, right, that Zakuk Levar and Zakuk Levar without the Dato Lachsor. Then we have Abayi's relationship to the second part of the statement, right? That's only Dato Lachsor. The second statement is Dato Lachsor, but Dato Lachsor you don't have it. And the first statement. So we're now in Rav Yehuda Marav. Kodem Shloshim Yom LaPesach, says Rashi. Okay, we did that already, right? Says Rashi. Okay, that already is giving us far. Right? What's the significance of the 30 days? The 30 days is, I'm going to say in Lamdish terms, but I think you'll understand it. The moment he says Chal Alav, Lizaher, it sounds like there's a Chavas Gafra. You understand? In other words, 30 days somehow engenders some sort of obligation upon you. Lizaher b'tzarchei Pesach, and therefore, according to Rav Yehuda Marav, within 30 days, zakuk levaer. Without 30 days, outside of 30 days, there's no chavat hagavra. Maybe there's still, chavetz in your house. Maybe even you still buy matzeh, theoretically, but not your problem. You understand? That would be, in other words, if you want to take this to the nth degree, that would be high drama. In other words, it could be that here we've been able to refract a chovat hagavra that's independent of the isur bal matzeh. In other words, maybe you'll violate bal matzeh. Maybe we don't know. I don't know. But it doesn't make a difference. Not your problem. Not your problem right now. B'dikat chametz is usually to make sure you don't violate bal matzeh. But if you're going to go 30 days before, there's no chavat hagavra because it's not your pain. It's not your headache.
Why are we saying it's not chavat hagavra? Not maybe it's
on the house or gvulin. Gvulin we'll get to in a second. Right. So, in other words, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is Rashi doesn't say anything. It was if we wanted to take Rashi completely seriously, we'd say it's just not my problem. The fact that it's begvulin still or gvulecha, yeah, maybe there's chametz there.
Once you're not there, maybe.
That would be an alternative. You don't have to.
You are exited from the.
Correct. So then Rashi continues. Okay, why does this interest me again? Avram Stav, who's the son of the famous Rabbi Stav, he has an article where he compares this to. He says we have a similar thing that you're not allowed to travel in a boat. You remember on Shabbat, you're not allowed to travel in a boat 3 days before Shabbat. There's a whole discussion there, like why are you traveling and how and what is that? He wants to connect that to this, and he says, statistically speaking, he didn't say this, but I'm saying like this. What's the difference if you get on a boat at midnight, at midnight or 11:59? No trouble. It's like statistically speaking, there's absolutely no difference. It's just that 3 days before, the rabbi said it's not your problem anymore. If something happened, yeah, it happens. You might end up violating Shabbat, but it's not your problem, right? Right now you have no chavat hagavra. I thought that was I didn't think the connection was so good, but I thought the idea that somehow there's at some point the rabbis have to obligate you, right? There's an institution they have to obligate you on, and then they say take your chances.
Yeah.
Whereas as opposed to what you're saying, which is that maybe we can say that if you're traveling 30 days before and you're out of town and you're not coming back, then it's not Gulecha anymore, so there's no connection to the thing, which is Okay, let's keep going. Sorry. Right, let's keep going. So then Rashi says dato lachzor b'yemei Pesach. Okay, that's obvious. Oh no, it's not so obvious. Excuse me. Dato lachzor b'yemei Pesach. Right, as opposed to before Pesach or after Pesach. We'll see that.
It has to be after Pesach already begun.
Right, exactly. Rashi seems to take the position that's before Pesach. We'll come back to that. And then Rava says, what do you mean? If you're planning to come back before Pesach, then after Rosh Hashanah, the chihadar b'yemei Pesach, avar aleha. This is Rava's position, right? What do you mean? It's what I'm about to say. Right? So he says, "Va'ishaita la b'rshute hu levatle." Right? It's not yours. Shari Yisur hanahu ve'eno shalo. Ukesharahu over Allah. That's what Rava says to Abai. The question is, what does Abai hold? Abai must hold. You don't. He says either you don't violate by Allah by matzeh, or we don't care that you violate by Allah by matzeh because no chavra gavra. Right? The Ran doesn't like this at all. Right? It says the Ran idat Allah zar filim Rosh Hashanah nami katav Rashi dechihadar limei Pesach. It's not yours because the Torah took it out of your house, right? Shaino shalom, sharo over Allah. Ve'ino b'ritzli. The vatai kol eno zakuk levair damrin hacha. Right? He says, "What the heck are you talking about, Rashi? That you're going to violate by matzeh?" No one ever thought this was the discourse was talking about by matzeh. No one would have a halacha like that. No, it's how could Rava come along to Abai, say to Abai, "What are you insane? If you're going to come back during Pesach, you're going to violate by matzeh." No one thinks Abai doesn't believe you by matzeh. So that couldn't possibly be the case. What are we talking about here? Right? It's the devadai kol eno zakuk levar. I mean, that's in quotes. When the Gemara says you leave and you're not there for 30 days, you leave 30 days before eno zakuk levar. That doesn't mean you're going to violate by matzeh, right? Bitul mihabai. What do you mean? There's an assumption in this Gemara, which the Gemara forgot to tell us, which is you did bitul. Of course, if you leave 30 days before, you have to still do bitul chametz. In which case, there's no problem by right? So he completely neutralizes. But again, why am I so interested in the Ran? Not for what he says, because he understood Rashi like we understood Rashi. But he understood Rashi that Abayi really believes there might be a Abayi problem, and yet Abayi still says you don't have to check 30 days before. Right? You understand? Otherwise, because I saw you were skeptical about my reading of it, I saw like on your eye. So that's why I wanted to bring the Ran. The Ran definitely understood Rashi the way I understood Rashi, which is that for Abayi, there's a Abayi matzeh problem. We don't care if you leave 30 days before. He said, the Ran says, how the heck could Rashi say what he says? He did bitul. There's nobody going to say here. Everybody knows you did bitul. Rabbi and Rava and Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, everybody thinks you did bitul. So question number one is, did you do bitul or not? That's a practical question. But again, if I want to accentuate how extreme Rashi might be, then I'm going to end up with a, right? So the Ran does a big favor for me by telling me that's the way. Rashi's inconceivable that way, but he understood Rashi that way. Again, so let's just read it. Kevin Shuber Shuto Pesach. Forget about whether you're planning to come back or not planning to get back. It's in your Rishuto. The Karina babe, that's exactly Jeff's point, right? I'll prove it to you. Right? You remember when you put the furniture next to the house? Otsar is just like if the house comes crumbling down. Crumbling's the wrong word. Okay, if the house falls down, no, we know that a house falls down, you still have to do bitul. So of course you did bitul here. The kodem lamed yom lo yizkeku lechachem levaer. Right, the rabbis didn't require you to do biur ayi b'dika, but bitul the sagi, you don't write the sagi. Since we know we don't write the bitul ba'alma sagi, so you did bitul. Yes, you did bitul. There's no problem doing right, but you should still, if you're planning to come back on Pesach, maybe you'll come eat the chametz. So therefore, we should require, biur's biur, which is bidika as well, right? Ella the kodem namid yom ve'in da tolach sor. If you're not planning to come bebitul ba'alma sagile, the halo atelim b'chamine aval tochlam b'kevan shachal chovad biur. No, that's what Rava said. Okay, so, but again, the Ran is helpful for me not because he disagrees with Rashi and assumes there was a bitul here. It's because he claims that Rashi didn't think there was a bitul here. And if that's the case, then we have this totally fascinating sheet of Abai that somehow 30 days before there's a chiyuv gavra, and even if you're planning to come back, right? No, it's if you're more than 30 days before, there's no chiyuv gavra, and even if you're planning to come back on Pesach. And the question is, how do you explain that, right?
That's the innovation.
Right, you can't. The bittul doesn't help, and you can't do bittul on Pesach, and we don't require you to do bittul before. So that's an amazing, that's a crazy sheet though. Like, how can that possibly be? So again, I tried to give you like, in some sense of, maybe it's because sometimes we don't require you to, when we say take your chances, there's no chavad gam. That totally fascinates me. So I want to.
Specifically, there's no bittul. I mean, you could.
He doesn't say there's no bittul. Correct.
It's not his opinion.
Correct. I also thought about this in the context of if this is Rashi's position. Again, I'm open to saying it's not Rashi's position, but I think the Ran believed that it was Rashi's position, so that's good enough for me. Okay. I'm interested in just thinking for a moment about, we saw a contradiction in Rashi between Daf Daled and Daf Bet. Remember, because Rashi and Daf Bet says the whole problem, the whole idea of B'dikat Chametz is to overcome Bal Yirah, Bal Yimatzah, when you don't have Bitul. Right, Rashi, remember that? He says it could actually solve the right the problem. So I was trying to figure out, but I couldn't figure out how that fits into this. Sometimes my initial thinking is the best, and then I tried to play it out. I couldn't figure it out. My initial language is this is the opposite, but I couldn't figure out why I said that. Like I said, oh my God, this is the opposite. But then I never figured out why I said that. I don't know exactly how this fits in with that. That's still an open question. I don't want to mix you up too much. Okay, there's this.
Saying bittul doesn't we thought it did about B'dika.
No, it's B'dika in Rashi and Daf Bet overcomes the problem by Matzeh. Tosfos hates that, right? It overcomes the problem by Matzeh. Here, Rashi is saying something different, according to the Ran's reading of Rashi. He's saying that even without B'dikat Chametz, you're still going to violate by Matzeh. It was without B'dikat Chametz, you're going to violate by Matzeh. According to Rava. What is Abai? So again, Abai, we're open to two possibilities. Either it's not kulecha because you're completely distanced from it, or it's maybe, again, I'm okay, so here, let's put it out on the table. What are the ways to explain Abai? So one way to explain Abai is, yes, you're going to violate, there's a possibility you're going to violate by let's say, if there's chametz in your house. Right, there's no chametz in your house.
And you're assuming he didn't do bittul. He didn't do bittul.
Right, so again, Ron, I'm saying, Ron says, Rashi says that, okay? So we're going with that now. So if we take the Ran's reading of Rashi, so there's one way of two ways to say it, I think. Either you can say, you violate by Matzeh, and we don't care, because there's no Chavad Agavra. Very, very fascinating. That would be a new sheet that we haven't come across that yet. Or you don't violate by Matzeh because we don't consider this kulecha. We consider this, in words, if you're not assuming
from the time Pesach started, it wasn't in your reshut, therefore it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's not yours.
As long as this is already the Svarmad. If you're not within, right, let's just make sure we understand. If you're not within 30 days, if you're not, it was within 30 days, then not only is there no Chovat HaGavra, but somehow that's going to eliminate the possibility of violating by Matzeh, even if you come back on Pesach. Why would that be? That's the question.
Because you don't have a connection to it when the issue
I guess
the Havamina would be, let's say somehow you came into an inheritance in the middle of Pesach of Chametz.
Right. So you violate by Matzeh. So there you have to accept it in order to do it. Right. There has to be something that would make it into your reshut. Right. I guess so. So this is right. So this is the second way of saying it. I want to do one thing before, but I'll do it after. Okay. So this is the way the Rav wanted to go with this. The Rav said that if you're not going to be home, he said, obviously you're not going to violate by Matzeh. No, it's not like I wanted to say, right? You violate by Matzeh, we don't, or you might violate by Matzeh, but we don't care. Like the boat, right? You go 3 days before, more than 3 days, there's a chance you're going to violate Shabbos, but we just don't care. So the Rav wanted to claim, I'll show you his proof in a minute. Okay, now I'm going in the letter order, so that me confused. He wanted to say the following. He said, if you're not planning to come back, how does it go, right? Forget about coming back first. If you leave 30 days before, right? Even if you're planning to come back, you've already, so there's no Chavad HaGavra, that's what we said, Rashi. So it's not just there's no Chavad HaGavra, you've completely distanced yourself. That Chametz is no longer connected to you in any way. Because you left so long before, it's just not relevant. That Chametz is not relevant to you.
We have no connection to it.
Right? Not your valid, and that's going to undermine the value by Matzeh. Not because we care about Gvulecha or not Gvulecha. It might still be in your Gvulecha, but it doesn't make a difference. There's no connection to it because you left so long before. So the Rav had two good proofs for this. One is the Gemara in Pesachim and Daf Kaf Aleph. I'm doing this a little out of order, but you'll see. There's a sheet of Beit Shammai. What does the Beit Shammai say? Lo yimkor adam chemtzo lenochri, ela im ken yodea sheyichleh kodem haPesach. That's a very fascinating sheet, right? You can only, it's like giving your laundry to the non-Jew to do, right? And you want to pick it up on Saturday night, you have to know that he has an hour. You can't give it to him 2 seconds before Shabbos. So here also, you have to sell it to the non-Jew with enough time that he can finish it before Pesach. Okay? Beit Hillel says, Kol shashem mutar le'achol, as long as you can eat it, or it's until noon, mutar limkor, you can sell it, even if you can't possibly eat all your chametz. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, that's the most interesting. He says, kutach, kol mune kutach habavli is like this mixture. It's like a flour, right, and some sort of yeast thing. I don't know what to compare it to, but Michelle once tried to make it. Wow, that's what we do in our house, right? Asurlim, because the Gemara in Bracha is expressing before. Asurlim kor shloshim yom kodem haPesach. Oh, that's very interesting. So the Rav said, like, what is this? Why 30 days? So it could be, related to the physiology of the kutach, right? But it could be, and it spoils or gets better. I don't know what. Could be. But he said this the very notion that there's 30 days as a factor in the Asurlim core might demonstrate that what?
But there is no Inyan of Pesach 30 days before.
Right.
On anything.
Right.
Whether
Exactly.
someone comments being Vayirah, you're saying it doesn't exist.
Right, exactly. There's no relevance of Pesach. Right? If you somehow distance yourself from this chametz before 30 days, it's just not relevant. And then the chametz, we have another dimension of b'chol gvulecha, right? Reshut, and then we have time, right, as a factor that somehow this wouldn't be. That's very fascinating, right? That's a very fascinating shita. And there's another proof that he brought, which is, can I bring on this page? Oh, I know it's here. It's in the tour. That's why. Okay, so let's take a look at the tour for a minute. It's the Rav Yah quoted in the tour. I wanted to read the whole tour. That's why I wanted to do it in this order. Now I remember how I wanted to do this order. Okay, so we'll just read the tour and then we'll come back to the Ritva for a moment. The tour says, I'm a farish. So again, we're going to get to the Rav's proof at the end, but let's just get the shito. I'm a farish. בשיירה, ואינו מניחו בביתו. Mishi Yivdok. You didn't leave anybody at home, okay? Because otherwise you could just do it by Shaliach. Vein dato lachzor b'toch haPesach. We pass them like Rava. Imu koram li'amid gam lefnei haPesach and etzarich lavar. Uk'shiyagia haPesach yivat lenu v'libo. In other words, we assume, like the Ran, that you do bitul. You with me, right? And as long as there's no one in the house, but we pass them like Rava. V'imu b'toch lamid yom tzarich levaer. Then you have to do bedika as well. Shekvar chalalav chovat biur. Okay, that's right. Kevan de dorshin b'lchot haPesach. V'im dator lachzor b'toch haPesach. If you were planning to come back b'toch haPesach, afilu Rosh Hashanah tzarich levar. It's one sec. What does he mean here? 1 second. V'im dator lachzor b'toch haPesach. And one sec, what did he say a second ago? You don't have to do that. And that's a lot of sorry. Im hu betoch lamed yom. Sorry, that's all right. Sorry, that's all if aim dat olachzor. Right. Sorry. Im dat olachzor kol betoch Pesach avim Rosh Hashanah tzarich levar. Im shachach v'lo badak yivatel keshiyagia Pesach. Inyan habracha. This I'm putting out there because we're going to talk about this next time when we talk about. There's the next time we're going to meet. We're going to talk about how. The next line of the Gemara says, "Habodek tzarich shevarech." Okay, that's a super funny line because no one, you don't have like hatokeh tzarich levarech or like mapitom, right? It says like what was the meaning of that, right? So one of the questions that comes up is, okay, Bedika on the 14th night, we're going to do that this year, or maybe this year on the 13th. We talked about that already, the Shabbos problem. But what about how early, in other words, in these different Bedikas that we just talked about, Yotze B'Shayara, do you make a bracha or not? So we know you don't make a bracha until the night before. So, but that's a machloket. Linin a bracha, katav, I guess, Bedek HaBayit, Imu Yodea, Sheyesh Lo Chametz, if you know 100% that you have chametz in the house, Yivarech al bitul chametz. When you make a different bracha, you say al biur chametz. V'im lav lo yivarech. V'nireh shafilu yodea sheyesh lo chametz u'eto ein tzarich lavarech. Kevan she'ikar habitul beliba. Bitul is belev, so you don't, and it's a, and therefore you don't make brachas on things that go on your heart. V'im mechashev b'libo levatel sagi lo matzinu bracha al machshava shebalev. Avagav shenohagim lomar kol chamira. Lo matzinu. No, it's even though you have a ma'aseh of saying something. Lo matzinu shetiknu chachamim zeh. El shanagu. Okay, there is people have a minhag. There was a big debate when you make a bracha on bitul. We'll see this in the Ram in a minute. Even if you're planning, okay, so until now we've been saying if you plan to come back on Pesach. The Rambam says if you're planning to come back before Pesach, tzarich levaer. You have to do bedika. If you're within 30 days, you have to do bedika when you leave. Wait, if you're going on a business trip this week, Jeff, you have to do bedika chametz. You're planning to come back before Pesach. You still have to do bedika chametz, says the Rambam. Yeah, 30 days is even, that's a totally great shita. We have to think about that. I'll get back to it in the Rambam in a minute. Maybe your flight will be delayed.
It's not a proof that there's something in the 30 days beginning there.
Right. Yafeh. That it worries, right. Sorry, I lost the place. Sorry. So beito al tsar ve'in dato lefanato kodem lamed yom eno tzarich levarer. In other words, if you put the furniture there, elam mevat lebelibo kshegia pesach toch lamed tzarich levarer. V'im dato lachzor afilu Rosh Hashanah tzarich levarer. Okay, now we get the Kati Aviyah. This is the Ravya. Yisrael shayotze mi beit avodat gelulim toch lamed yom. Right, you rented a non-Jewish house. So within 30 days of Pesach, tzarich levarer, you have to do bedikat chametz. Afal pisha vid gelulim yitain bo chametz. It's even though the chametz there's gonna be a chametz in this house for sure. You still have to do bedika within 30 days. Right? Shehamitzvah mutelat al Yisrael levaer kishiyotze mimenu. Okay? So he says, that's really amazing. You're going to do bedikat chametz on a house where it's, I'm now taking my kids away for a couple of days because right, we're going away. In principle, according to the Rav, I have to do bedikat chametz when we leave.
But then, how do you know it's when you leave and not necessarily do the chametz on the 14th? Because you just do it.
No, you know what he's saying bedika. Kishiyotze mimenu, doesn't menu. Then he says, V'hani mili b'mefarish v'yotze b'shayara. If I'm leaving the Beit Avodah, aval im nichnasa Yisrael b'bayit acher b'ir hazot. He says, I require you to do bedikat chametz when you leave because there's a chovat gavra on you. But I only require you to do that if you're not moving into a different house.
Right.
But if you're going, if you're renting a house, wow, this is unbelievable. You're going on vacation according to the Rav, you don't have to bedikat chametz in your house. Forget about selling chametz. You're not planning to go back? You don't have to do bedikat chametz. Yeah, you don't have to do bedikat chametz. It's only move a second in your house. Right, exactly.
But the assumptions.
One sec. Bodek shama. Ve'ein tzarich livdok kan.
Right.
Why not?
Because it's a mitzvah gavra.
Right. So this is the Rav's ultimate proof. The Rav's ultimate proof is that 30 days creates not a connection to your chametz. It connects an obligation on you.
Right.
We need you to do bedikat chametz. Right. So as long as it's again, I imagine if you had chametz in your house, you probably should try to get rid of it. But in principle, there's a chovat agav on you to do bedikat chametz that's independent of whether you're going to violate matzeh on this.
Innovation is it's a comment on you, but only 30 days before.
Right. Exactly. Right. Only within 30 days would you have to do this, but you can get away with just doing it wherever you are. That's amazing. That's crazy. It's almost like the bedikat chametz, but it's almost like the bedikat chametz is totally separate from the owner the chametz that you own. It's like there's a it sounds like we've done a fabulous job of like right that completely
that ties into when we talked earlier about why is it sorry that there was this like unique time that we were doing
right yafeh that we need you to correct
that somehow we want you to be thinking about that time
right yafeh. So that would be a good feature of that. So this Ravia and the position of Ravina ben Beter about the Chababli, both those things seem to fit into this idea that there's the 30 days somehow creates a new obligation. It creates chametz basically. Right, it creates the chametz, but it doesn't create chametz in the sense that
It's your obligation.
creates your obligation to do something about the chametz.
But you still have.
It could be, by the way, that it's very interesting. Or it could be that this position is, or the chofetz hagavar is so powerful. It's not the chametz that's toxic. It's your responsibility to demonstrate in a very concrete way that you're severing yourself from chametz, even if you do it in a different house than your primary residence.
But practically, you still have an obligation to get rid of chametz you own, even if you're not there.
Right. So that's it's not clear to me. Like, so what does the Rav again? Does the Rav think if you know that there's chametz there, you can just leave it? Is that otzar? It could be again otzar. That's the case of otzar, right? Otzar again, the furniture.
Yeah.
You know there's chametz there, but you put your
so you don't have any obligation to
do anything.
It's not accessible.
Right. Again. Right. So
that's not the same.
Does the Rav think you're doing? What's not clear to me is the Rav think you're doing bitul, or it's maybe bitul solves that problem and this. But again, this
he says pride levine. Why do you think that's also bedika?
Because I just assume that biur here is always bedika. Biur here is not burning. That's for sure.
But maybe there are two different things. There's your relationship with the law. That's bedika, no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then separately, you might have a practical thing as do you own chametz or not own chametz.
Right.
So
I agree. So the way you can overcome the second problem is by doing bitul.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's no such thing at all. Maybe it's not yours.
From where you are.
Bitul from
where you are.
Where you are, right. You don't have to be there.
So then what's
the problem? We're afraid you're going to find we're afraid you're going to find a piece of chametz, but you're not going to find a piece of chametz if you're.
The Rabbi's opinion about Yachom and Rosh Hashanah, there shouldn't be any obligation in any case.
And what you're telling me, I've done such a good job explaining Abaye.
Why would there be any obligation at all, Rosh Hashanah?
So again, Ron says, yeah, there's Ba'imatzei problems. It's gulecha. But that's what we pass in, right? It's still gulecha. You still need to do. You have to get it out. The way you can get it out is before Pesach, Bitul. That gets written. Okay, so we see that there's two models here. Again, the most radical reading of Rashi is. And we don't care if you're bothered by it. Okay, that's hard to imagine, but it's possible. The second model is to say you did bitul, that's the run, and then you got rid of the problem. A third model is to say you don't necessarily have to do bitul, maybe you have to. The main thing is that the Chovot HaGavra only kicks in at 30 days. 30 days has some sort of significance. That creates a connection to you in this chametz. And before that, there is no connection at all. Okay, now we just have two more quick things to do, and then we can finish up. Yeah, go ahead.
Creates a connection to you and this chametz. It's not this chametz.
It creates a chametz. Yafem. Okay, I just got three more things. One is Rav Elyashiv's thing, which is a good, interesting tshuva that he got the following. He said, the boys in the yeshiva, what are they supposed to do? In principle, they all leave for Ben Azmanim. So, how do they do b'dikat chametz? So, why this also came up a little. So he thought
they do it home. Huh?
Well, so that's it. No. So what do? Do they have to do b'dikat chametz before they leave in their yeshiva rooms or not? Right? Because they're not planning to come back, right?
But that you could argue is always within 30 days.
It's always within 30 days, but they're not planning to come back. So he said, what are you supposed to do? Lean in bracha, just quickly, Rav Yashiv's thing. In the notes, there was a note taken about this. גם בדיקה שעשה קודם 30 יום חייב בברכה, כיוון שאינו בודק משום שרוצה מעצמו כך, אבל משום דתקן לחם, הוא מברך על זה. אפילו כשיוצא מביתם הוא יברך על שרק ראשון על ביור חמץ. שיטה שלישית, אין מברך אף לא בשלושת ברכה, רק בדוק לאור י"ד. להלכה, למעשה, ספק ברכה להקל, אז we paskin, ולין בחורים הלומדים בישיבה, וישנים בישיבה וחוזרים לבתיהם בראש חודש ניסן, צריך ללמוד למנהל הישיבה, שמן הראוי שיפקיע את זכותם לשהות בישיבה בפסח. He should tell them they're not allowed to come back. Shari lo shalan habayit b'yeshiva letzorach limudam b'yeshiva v'kem shemafkim et zkutam. Or is it kemocher beito shepater mibedika? Once he knew that the boys weren't doing bedika before they left, so he said, "Tell them in Ahel to not do it." He wanted to avoid the problem altogether. I thought that was interesting. Okay, there's just one more line in the Ritva that I wanted to show you, and then the Rambam. So if we go back to the Ritva, yeah. All right. Right? That was only if you're planning to come back within Pesach. Sorry, ain't that Pesach. But if you were planning to come back before Pesach, then you have to do B'dika. That's what Rava said to Abaye, right? Ella o kodem lachen. Then the Ritva adds o lachar mikin. That's interesting. Where it's you're planning to come back before or after. Then you have to do a B'dika. So then you don't have to do a B'dika. Again, you're planning to come back before, so then you understand, Jeff, why you don't have to do a B'dika, because you'll do a B'dika when you come back. Or after. Ooh, that's already interesting. Those words are interesting. What if you're planning to come back after Pesach? Right? You understand? What if you're planning to come back after Pesach? That's what we thought. Wasn't there Chametz Shavuot Pesach? In other words,
some problem.
Right. No, so it's obviously not the same problem. The Achar Pesach is before the Pesach, and it might not necessarily be the same problem, right? But that's a question that also comes up here. Finally, let's just read the Rambam quickly. The Rambam says, "Hamifarish bayam bayotze b'sheyar toch shloshim yom zakuk livtok." So if you go on a trip within 30 days, then you have to do bedika before you go. Kodem shloshim yom tzarich livtok. V'im da'ato lachzor kodem haPesach. Again, not after a Pesach. Tzarich livtok. V'achar kach, right? If you're planning to go back before, then you have to do it. V'achar kach yitzeh. Shem yachzor erev Pesach ben hashmashot v'lo yeleh pnai leva'er. It sounds like this is a takana de Rabbanan that the Rambam made up, right? That or he had a different verse in the Gemara that he says if you're planning to come back before Pesach, then then within 30 days, right? Sorry, is that within 30 days or not within 30 days?
He's saying it's just the technicality. You don't have time to do beer.
No, he's saying even before 30 days, anytime if you're planning to come back before Pesach, anytime. Yeah. The Rambam used to say anytime you're planning, in which you go away, if you're planning to come back before Pesach. Whereas if your plan is to come back before Pesach, so the Rambam doesn't draw lines. Like when Jeff's going on vacation now for a couple of days, he's coming back 3 weeks before Pesach. He has to bedika now because he might not make it back. It's not clear like what's going on in the Rambam here. The Rambam has this other dimension of if you're planning to come back before Pesach. And what if you're planning to come back after Pesach, the issue of the Ritva? So then, what would the Rambam say about that?
He's not worried about it.
Right? It seems like he's not worried about it. Right?
He doesn't talk about coming back on Pesach even, right?
Right. If you go Toch Shloshim Yom, you have to do Bedika. Kodem Shloshim Yom, you don't have to do Bedika, unless you're planning to come back before Pesach. What if you're planning to come back on Pesach? Not clear in the Rambam. What if you're going back after Pesach? Also not clear in the Rambam.
But the Rambam specifically says the thing he's worried about is what happens right before Erev.
Right.
Which also.
What does he think? What does he think if you leave within?
So B'dika, but you could do bittul wherever you are.
Yeah, the Rambam doesn't talk about bittul either.
But it seems from how he's saying it that if it happens during Pesach, he's not worried about that.
Right. There's an irony in the Rambam. That's what I wanted to say. That's what I was looking for in the Rambam. The Rambam ends up having this very, very strange shita, which until now we understood. If you come back on Pesach, you have to do B'dika, even be Rosh Hashanah. The Rambam sounds like if you come back before Pesach, there's going to be a problem. But if you come back on Pesach, there's not going to be a problem. That seems weird.
Unless there's no inyan for you because of where you are before Pesach.
Or it's if you're going to come back on Pesach, then somehow you did bittul before Pesach. But if you think you're going to come back before Pesach, you won't do bittul, you won't do anything, and then you're going to have a problem.
I'm worried that when this inyan is chal, again, it's back to maybe this idea of Gabra is with time.
Yeah.
So it could be before 30 days, it doesn't apply. It might be after Erev Pesach, it doesn't apply either.
Right. So on Erev Pesach,
on this, like
the big concern for the Rambam, ironically, is if you come back on Pesach, so then you'll know to do bittul wherever you were, if you're planning to come back.
You don't have a
but if you're planning to come back on Erev Pesach or somewhere in that range, let's say, then you might not do bittul before because you think you're going to come back. Then you're planning to delay and you forget to do bittul altogether. So the Rambam wants you, Tafka, if you're planning to come back on Erev Pesach, then you have to do bedika before you leave. But if you're planning to come back on Pesach, it's not a problem because you can get away with bittul. But again, the Rambam doesn't talk about bittul at all, which is strange. When again, most of them read the Rambam in light of the Ran. They say the Rambam agrees with the Ran. You did bittul.
Well, you've done bittul.
Yeah, you've done bittul.
In which case, all we're talking about here.
Beit Yosef, for example, reads the Ran. He says the Rambam is definitely like the Ran.
So the only dogma is in addition to bittul, do you do bedika?
Right.
Which is why with
you would do,
it doesn't matter.
right, but to do Badika before Pesach, that makes a difference. So if you're planning to do it before, and that's why, because you're planning to come back before, then we want you to do it before, way before.
Yeah.
So if you're planning to go away.
Badika only works from 30 days up until Erev Pesach.
Right, exactly.
No concept of Badika more than 30 days.
And since you might miss it on Erev Pesach,
Then we want to
make sure you do it, so do it before. So maybe it's a Chova Gavra or Mamash, like you have to do, if the Chova Gavra kicks in, you have to do it, even if though you're doing Bitul, you still have to do it, and do it, because you might miss it, so do it.
But he's saying the finish line is you can do it even before 30 days.
Right.
If you know
you're coming back, right? Again, he doesn't give us the range, but assuming you're coming back, I assume if you can travel now, you're coming back in 2 days, you don't have to do it. I assume.
If you come back, then you know you're here before Pesach.
Right, so you won't be able to
do it.
But what does he say? He says, Im da'ato lachzor kodem Pesach. He doesn't tell you what kodem Pesach is. Tzarich livdok. V'achar kach, in other words, don't go on your vacation before till you've done bedika. And that's even what's all year round. He doesn't tell you when. Shema yechzor erev Pesach ben hashmona. It must be if you're coming back erev Pesach. Lo yela panad levayer, and there he must mean levayer means also bitul and bedika. Okay, the Ram sheet is a little strange, right? It definitely stands out as this. You have to do bedika. Whenever you leave, you have to do it. You have to come back and do bedika before, because you might not have time. Okay, look, the Rambam was, setting up again there, which is great, but the extent to which we can take this seriously, it might end up causing us every time we go on vacation do bedika. But again, the main thing up for me today is again either the radical shita is right. The time somehow, the 30 days somehow engenders a connection to the chametz and makes you do bedika. And the Rav Yah is really dramatic. It makes you do bedika even if it's not for your chametz, even if it's not for your old chametz, it's for your new chametz. But still, you have to do a bedika. That requires a bedika. That's new material for us. That's a new direction for bedika chametz. Okay, we'll stop here. Thanks. Shloshim yom kodem hachag. To be continued next time with the bracha. Okay, excellent.
Are you going away?
I'm going away this week for just a couple of days, but I'll be back for the weekend.